Hello and welcome to Melomaniax, the podcast where we take unbiased deep dives into the biggest musicians and bands of all time. I'm Ashton.
And I'm Dallas. Today we are going to be talking about your rapper's favorite rapper, the illest supervillain of them all, MF Doom. But first, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Most importantly, hit us with those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, although we do appreciate those reviews on all platforms. Also, we officially have a Patreon. It is live. We offer one $5 per month tier. It's going to give you access to our Discord, as well as a shout out on an episode, and the ability to vote on future episode topics. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. MF Doom.
Love that name. This is actually my favorite rapper, mainly because I guess growing up I never really got into hip hop initially, but as we talked about in the past, Gorillaz is one of my favorite bands of all time, and MF Doom was a feature on there. Same with Del the Funky Homo Sapien, who also features on some songs. So a lot of my introduction into rap was actually through Gorillaz, and so those artists kind of stuck with me, and I kind of ventured off into their stuff and been a fan ever since. So I was really excited to do this episode. He just had this book come out here recently. I think the official release date was like October 27th, something like that. But near the day he died, actually, he died on Halloween a few years back. So that was probably really good marketing on their part for releasing that book when they did. So this one will actually be more of like, I guess, me explaining it to you. I know I've sent you a few songs to listen to, and I know you've heard an occasional thing, but
Oh yeah, I'm ready to learn.
this is going to be mainly me. But let's hop back to the beginning like we always do with that biography. We love that. I already can't talk, dude, right off the bat. Daniel.
Wow, great start. First word.
Daniel Dumoulin. That's how you pronounce that. There's going to be some fun pronunciation with his brothers and sisters that I'm going to butcher, but I'll do my best. But Daniel Dumoulin was born in London on July 13th, 1971. So his mom was actually visiting her sister in the UK and had a premature birth. So she went into labor without expecting it. She expected to be back in the US when it happened, but things don't always work as planned, which is kind of funny because Nicole and I may have been trying to plan having a baby and accidentally being in Scotland when it happens to maybe help us get some citizenship over there. Like, oops, oh man, I didn't mean to be here when the baby was born.
That's so funny.
So anyways, after he was born, they had to wait a couple months, to be able to fly back, and they went back to Long Island, New York as soon as they were able to. Doom would actually keep his British citizenship and never gain his American citizenship. So that's kind of interesting that like your parents can both be of American citizenship and then have you in another country and you're not able to get your, I guess he could have applied for it, but he just never did. And so but he always identifies as a New Yorker, not as a British, citizen. So he definitely identifies with New York. So they go back to Long Island, and Doom was actually the first of 4 or 5 kids. It only lists 4, but it says 5, so I don't know. I think he had a half brother or sister with a different parent. But his first brother was Dinglesway, I believe, Dinglesway or something like that.
Dinglesway. I don't know.
Dinglesway, I think, is how it's actually pronounced. I think I looked up the pronunciation. Dinglesway.
I like that. Dinglesway.
And he was born in 1973, followed by his brother Dimbaza, who was born in 1975, and his sister Denjiwe, who was born in 1977. So all authentic African names. It's pretty sweet. I like it. His Doom's mom was a practicing nurse, and his father was a school teacher and an activist for African Americans in the U.S. So that's I think he was responsible for getting the first black cop hired in New York City or something like that back in the late 60s or something like that. So but But long before Doom took on his MF Doom persona, his mom actually used to call him Doom. It was his nickname as a kid, and this was kind of like a play on their last name Doomale, so it used to call him just Doom. And I think that's pretty cool that it kind of ended up like transferring into his like later stage name.
Yeah, that's
Excuse me.
awesome.
Sorry guys, I'm getting over this cold, so I might occasionally cough, sniffle, but we're here and we're doing it. I know Dallas has had to.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, hey, you've had to pursue through the same things before.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. All right, I'm ready. When Doom was about 8 years old, he and his siblings would spend time at their babysitter Dolores' house, and Dolores had two sons, Charlie and Doug, who were 17 and 20 at the time. And Charlie and Doug had a pair of turntables in the basement, and they were both heavy into music. And so it talks about Doom and his brother kind of like peeking down into the basement at them making music, and from like that as the start to like then going down there and introducing themselves, and then finally Charlie and Doug kind of taught Doom and his brother how to DJ. And I kind of like the early, so like the really early like DJing is just like, and even it is till now, you're just taking like old songs and revamping them and remixing them, and that's basically how like hip hop and rap was born. Which is why they say that's kind of how rap evolved from the inspirations of like the early 50s, 60s music, because that's the music they were taking and turning in, like throwing a beat over it and like, adding some different things. So pretty cool. And so not long after this, Doom's parents would actually get divorced, unfortunately. And this was about the same time that Doom and his brother got heavy into comic books. So he remembers his dad being pretty strict with them when his parents were together. They were basically only allowed to watch like Saturday morning cartoons, but outside of that, they weren't allowed to consume any other kind of media, I guess I'll say, like things like that. So once they got divorced, they went to live with their mom, and their mom let them get into comic books, and they specifically loved Marvel. That was where they really associated. And Doom recalled, and I quote, "The whole Marvel universe was our shit. Straight up, Iron Man to X-Men to Fantastic Four to even like Alpha Flight. All the dope shit. All the spin-offs and everything. The whole Marvel universe, the way they designed it, everything played a part in everything." I don't even know who Alpha Flight is, so he knows way more than I do.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's like way into it.
Right? Yeah. So Doom and his brother were into a lot of stuff at the time, not just comics. They did skateboarding, BMX biking. They got into DJing, like I said, hip hop dancing, and even got into graffiti. So like everything kind of played a part. And eventually they got into MCing. Excuse me. Gotta hit these occasional coughs to keep my throat clear. So when hip hop and rap were still new, like I was saying earlier, most beats were just older songs remixed. So in order to come up with beats, you needed records, and lots of records. And so Doom and his brother started collecting as many records as they could get a hold of. And his brother, Dinjaleesway, I think I'm nailing that. He actually started cutting hair going into high school. He used to give fades and cuts in exchange for records instead of money. So he'd be like, "I'll cut your hair. You got to bring me a record." And he didn't care what it was, where it was from. And so they slowly were able to build up this record collection. And it even joked like kids would like steal records from their parents' record collection, to go get cuts and give it to them. So they were building up that like just stacks and stacks of records and different songs to be able to work with. And so I'm going to start calling his brother Sub Rock because that's what his musical name is, and it's a lot easier to say. So Sub Rock was more into the DJing side of things, while Doom was more into the MCing. So, Sub Rock making the beats, making the music, and Doom writing the lyrics and rapping over it. So Doom and his brother would actually start their first rap group in about 1988 with a friend who went by Rodan and named it KMD. And Doom went by the alias Zevlov X, which was a play on Malcolm X's name. And his brother took on the name DJ Sub Rock, like I said. And then Rodan would later be replaced by Onyx the Burstone Kid. And Rodan being a call out to the character from Godzilla, I don't know how familiar you are with the Godzilla world, but
I am not.
Rodan is like
I know
the
Godzilla and that's it.
yeah, Rodan is like the pterodactyl, I believe, like a giant
Oh,
pterodactyl.
nice.
Yeah.
I know the band Gojira. Their name is from the Japanese pronunciation. I think it's Japanese of Godzilla.
Yep, that's a what is it? You remember the Godzilla that came out in like the early 2000s? Took place
I
in New
think
York
so.
City.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really haven't seen that many of them.
Yeah, that one was like on its own, like more like Hollywood's version instead of like the a lot of Godzilla films were like created in Japan. That one was like the first like
Yeah, I've
American
seen clips
one.
from those old ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
think I've seen the King of Monsters one. I think that's the one I saw,
okay,
like kind of recently.
the recent ones aren't bad actually. But
Yeah, it was pretty over the top. It was cool.
oh yeah, it's like one of those just nothing but action and effects. Like that's all you're seeing. But yeah, at the beginning of that one, he one of the people who sees Godzilla before it makes itself known worldwide, he calls it Gojira, Gojira. And there's like a whole thing but then they call it Godzilla in America. So, anyways, through local hip hop groups and freestyle scenes, Doom and Subrock met Search from Third Base, a rap group. The three of them and their other friend Simon, or AKA Mr. Hood, is what they used to call him. They used to hang out all the time, dancing, freestyling, DJing. They just all had a bunch in common. And they would even take Mr. Hood's car up to the mall to talk to girls. And they used to laugh about how some girls would make a certain face when rejecting them. And they eventually coined that look and called it the gas face, because they used to joke like, man, we wasted all that gas money just to get the gas face. Is what they called it. So just like inside jokes between the friends. And I mentioned that name, like the gas face, because that's the name of the song that Third Base creates, where KMD got their first feature. So Third Base kind of laid the stepping stones for rappers like Eminem, MGK, because the two main MCs were both white. And at the time, hip hop was still like, like really, I feel like they say like 87 is kind of like when hip hop was like truly born, like the current version that we know. And so like many people think that the Beastie Boys were like the OG white rappers, but they still had like, we haven't dove into the Beastie Boys, but the Beastie Boys were a punk rock band before they made their swap. And so they still include elements of like punk and rock into their style of rap. But Third Base was just like pure hip hop. If you go and listen, it just sounds like straight like early 90s rap and late 80s rap. So it's like really, really awesome. So Third Base consisted of Michael Barron, aka MC Search, Peter Nash, aka Prime Minister Pete Nice, or just Pete Nice, and then Richard Lawson, aka DJ Richie Rich. So Search is just like, I can't remember what he did, but he was just like this Jewish guy in New York, but he was just into all the hip hop scene, and just he was pretty good on a mic, pretty good at dancing, and so he was able to like get into these cliques. And then Pete Nice was actually, I think he played basketball. That's what it was. He played basketball in college, and then I had a knee injury that knocked him out, and he had to have a cane during that time after, and then he just kind of adapted that into his rapper look. So you'll always see him in an Armani suit and a cane. So he's pretty freaking
That's awesome.
sweet.
I like
Yeah,
adding
dude.
Prime Minister too. That's hilarious.
Oh, dude, it's all yeah. Prime Minister Pete Nice, and he always has like his cane and sits in like this really fancy. They always bring this really fancy chair into their music videos and stuff that he sits in. It's pretty sweet. And of course, like the videos are just like, oh man, glory to the late 80s for music videos that would appear on MTV throughout the 90s. So in 1989, Third Base released their first album, the Cactus album. And this album would be the one that included the song Gas Face, which I mentioned earlier. And the cover of the album shows the back of Search's head with Third Base shaved into the back of his fade. So Subrock had given Search a like high top fade because he had like a Jew fro, and so he was able to like kind of shape it up, and then he put like the original like Third Base in there, and then Pete facing the viewer puffing on a cigar. Like I said, Pete is just like badass, bro. Always cigar, cane, and a suit. Just fucking classy. So, anyways, the album got added to my library after listening because it's just I love some old '90s rap, and so I had to dive into listening to their stuff in the middle of doing my research for Doom, obviously. And so, anyways, the feature that got KMD on was Gasface, and actually that was just MF Doom, or at the time Zevlov. He got a rapping part at the end, but KMD got a shout out. And so that actually gave them enough attention to get signed by Elektra Records, a label owned by Warner Bros. And KMD would release their debut album a couple years later. But before that, I wanted to mention some cool facts I came across. So KMD did some touring with Third Base after the song Gasface, and Doom became friends with a few rappers on their tour. They kind of took a tour bus, went around as a group. And while touring, he met another rapper that was also coming up and doing features with a group. And that rapper happened to be Tupac Shakur. So he met him before he was famous and doing stuff. Then he also became decent friends with one of my other favorite rappers, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, through the same thing, just being on the road and meeting him. And I think it's really cool that Del and Doom were friends because they're both like my favorite two rappers, or older rappers, I'll say. And those two are
Yeah,
also the
that's
ones
awesome.
that were on Gorillaz songs. So I was just like, man, I love when things like tie together. It's so cool.
Yeah, I wonder if there was any reason, like, it seems crazy that's pure coincidence they were both on Gorilla songs later. There had to have been some sort of, oh, you got to get my buddy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there might that would sound familiar because Dell was on the very first Gorillaz album. You know, he was on Clint Eastwood and oh, what's the other song? I can't remember the other one, but he's on two songs from the debut album, so that definitely could have been the association. I also didn't found out during this that Dell is a cousins of Ice Cube's. So Dell probably got his start from being associated with Ice Cube, who was part of
Oh,
NWA,
yeah,
which
yeah.
was one of the earliest, biggest rap groups that there were. So kind of just that association with association, and that keeps going. So that was pretty cool. But let's talk about that debut album. So KMD's debut album, called Mr. Hood, was released in 1991. And quickly, we don't talk about. I just want to say there's not a whole lot of charts to mention on today's episode because Doom basically spends his entire career in like independent releases and labels and never wanted to really be mainstream. So he gets occasional Billboard 200s, but I don't think we'll mention the Billboard Hot 100 a single time today. So I might mention some smaller charts here and there just to give some context. But yeah, nothing too big with the Hot 100 today. So the album peaked at number 67 on the Billboard Top R&B albums, and it had three singles. The first single was Peach Fuzz, which peaked at number 11 on the Hot Rap Songs chart. The second single was Who Me, which hit number 19 on the Hot Rap Songs chart. And it also included a sample from Sesame Street where they interact with Bert. It's pretty funny. And then quick side note, this he always, like MF Doom, always does lots of sketches on his albums. He takes samples and recordings from TV shows and other things and like does all kinds of skits. And I know you and I have talked in the past that we love some skits and they kind of have gone away in recent years. But like, man, in like the 90s and early 2000s, tons of skits on everyone's albums, like just kind of as filler in between the songs. But anyways, he later be known for doing a lot of Fantastic Four clips since he takes on his MF Doom, which is a base on Victor Von Doom, the character from Marvel. So you'll hear a lot of Fantastic Four clips on his albums later on. But in this early part, they just took some. Mr. Hood has some samples from a language. What is it? It was like a language tape, like teaching you how to speak English. But they would just take these random parts, which it has the most stereotypical like white guy voice from like the 40s. It's kind of hilarious, and they like incorporate the clips of his voice and like he's in the hood buying shit, and it's really funny. I definitely recommend going to give it a listen.
Yeah, that's so funny.
And
I was
after,
just listening to a stand-up special last night where they were talking about that. No, well, see, like that old, like radio white voice.
Yeah, that's kind of like
And he
how
was
it is. It's funny.
he was making a joke that Jackie Robinson knocked that voice out of white people. She was like, up next is Jackie Robinson. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, you hit it out of the park. Okay, all right, geez. We're going to go work on computers.
Yeah, that's good. Um, and then I forgot to mention the third and final single from the album was Nitty Gritty, which wasn't able to hit any charts. So, but that's okay. They're still new. And so KMD had started working on their next album and planned for it to be released May of 1994, but tragedy struck. Doom's brother Subrock went to hang out with one of his friends, and the two were smoking weed and dropping acid, something that they did on the regular. So this was not really out of context. Quickly, I forgot to mention their first album was mainly about like race and equality and things like that, and that they were both like hadn't drank, hadn't smoked, no drugs. And then going on tour with Third Base and being around the rap scene, they both got into drinking and doing drugs and stuff. So it kind of changed a lot of what they would rap about on the second album. And so anyways, Subrock was at his buddies. They smoked, did some acid, and then they both went to sleep. And Subrock's friend woke up and Subrock was missing. And around 4 a.m., his body was found unconscious on the side of a highway. And he was brought to a hospital where he would shortly after pass away, I believe at the age of 17. It was 17 or 19. And the police just put it as he was hit by a car, but there's a ton of conspiracy theories and stuff that he had been jumped and just dumped on the side of the highway due to the nature of his injuries. It definitely looked more like he had been beat up than hit by a car, but just quickly putting a label on it to close a case. They just said it was he wandered out into the highway and was hit by a car. Regardless of what happened, this basically destroyed Doom. And like I said, KMD was in the middle of finishing up their second album, which was called Black Bastards, and this slowed things down. Doom did end up finishing the album over like an 8-month period. It was like basically almost finished, and then he just drug out the rest because he was just lost all his motivation and everything. And right before the release of the album, Elektra Records actually dropped KMD from the label as well because it had some controversial album artwork, which depicted a character that they had displayed on their previous album being lynched. So it was I could see why they wouldn't want to put out the album with the artwork if you go and look it up for Black Bastards. So now that we
I guess I just looked it up. It's very like cartoony.
It is
Like,
cartoony.
there's
Yeah,
definitely
they do
been way worse stuff out. It's crazy.
for sure. But I guess as an independent label and not big, that's where they draw their issues.
Yeah, true.
So wrapping things up in this year, in a window of less than a year, Doom lost his brother and his record deal, like within months of each other. And this would
That's another thing, real quick, to interject. Like, it's one. I can't believe he lost a deal over that. It seems like they would just be like, "Hey, man, you got to change the art," and he'd be like, "Well, I don't want to change the art." And they're like, "Well, then we're going to drop you." And then he has a choice to be like, "Okay, I'll change the art," or like, "Then drop me." Then you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of on him, I guess. But yeah, that's very weird because there's tons of times that in history that labels are like, "Yeah, we're not putting out that art."
Yeah,
Guns
yeah,
N' Roses
for
is
sure.
a famous one.
Yeah, with the one with the robot and the girl being raped.
Yeah,
I think
that's another one where it's like, dude, like, I mean, is it really that bad? Like I don't understand the like, yeah, whatever.
It is,
I'm
but
not
in a
charge.
way, in my opinion, from a sales perspective, it makes it stand out. Like you look at it, you're like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah, I guess. I think what made it sell even more though was the fact that it became controversial, right?
yeah,
If the label had just let it out, like most people wouldn't say anything about it. But the fact that they then pull it, make them change it, now it's all of a sudden like, whoa, what is it? Like I gotta go find this album, you know?
yeah, like bad publicity or all publicity is good publicity, right? So like,
Yeah, it's like when the PNRC, I think that's what they were called, when they decided they'd have to put the parental advisory stickers on the albums, like all the albums with those stickers ended up selling a whole lot more because of that. So it's like it kind of backfired, you know?
yeah, for sure. So it didn't really go into details on it just said he got dropped over the controversial album artwork is all it really said. So Anyways, this would lead to Doom taking quite a few years off making music, and the beginning of his villain arc, as we like to say. Dropped by the label, brother died, so he feels betrayed by the industry, and creates the villain. And he always liked to say that the villain is only a villain from one side of the story, but through the eyes of the villain, they're not a villain. So like it's kind of like what helped him create his character. But we'll get into that later. So the album Black Bastards actually was bootlegged throughout the late 90s, but wouldn't officially be released until May 15th of 2000 under Ready Rock Records, who decided to release it for him way, way later. And during Doom's time away from music, he actually spent some time homeless, just kind of lost as a person, just not knowing what to do. So like I said, he really took the death of his brother pretty hard, and he didn't start making music until sometime in 1997 when he hit the scene under a new alias. And he was showing up to random open mics and freestyling with tights over his face and hiding his identity and going by the name MF Doom. And so he began working on a new album with his buddy in his buddy Stretch Armstrong's home studio. He was crashing on his couch and just kind of put together some music. I guess, having that itch after quite a few years of not doing anything. And so the rap scene at the time was caught up in all kinds of news. The Notorious B.I.G. had recently been shot and killed in L.A., and his album Life After Death was selling millions of records. It was like the hottest thing. And this was only 6 months after Tupac Shakur got shot and killed. And so his album was also doing really well. So that was kind of like what was going on with the top end of the rap scene right now. And during all the commotion, Doom was working on his own project that was going to be released under an independent label called Fondulum. And he released a few tracks on the mixtape through Fondulum Chief's Babito Garcia's Footwork, Fat Beats, and some early e-commerce sites. So just like through a couple record stores and stuff under this private or independent label. And all 1,000 copies that they put out were actually sold pretty quickly, which surprised both of them. They were like, because Doom was just kind of doing it for the art, not really for any sales or anything, but they put it out there and actually swept off the shelves. So they continued to drop new singles as he was writing them until he had enough to put together an entire record. And before he released his record, he needed some artwork done for the album. And that's where Blake Latham comes into the mix. And Blake had worked with Pete Nice in the past and had done some other work with Third Base. So the two already had some common ground. And Doom had walked into Bobito's and asked him if he knew any good artists. And Blake happened to be in the store sitting in the corner. And Bob just pointed over to him. And so the two hit it off immediately. And they collaborated over the album cover and landed on a cover that depicted Doctor Doom. It was a straight up like cover of one of the comic books that Doctor Doom was on, in his like green cape and with his mask. And so they made a few alterations. They made the cape look like a green hoodie instead. They added MF Doom to it, and it was kind of cool because Doom was already holding a mic on that album artwork, so it just was like perfect. And it would later be a re-release would happen where they go back and they make it look like Doom with the mask with a black eye underneath of it instead of just a solid, silver mask where you can't see any human features behind it. So I like the artwork, but with the artwork being finished, this is not the only thing Blake had a role in. So he actually played a huge role in creating MF Doom, the character, and his look. So he helped him design his famous mask. And Doom, after the death of his brother, he liked maintaining anonymity. This is a hard word for me. Anonymity. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for the assist.
I'm here for the assist.
Dude, I hate that word. I don't know why my tongue.
That's a tough one because you start it as you're reading it. You start it one way and then you realize halfway through, oh, I started it the wrong way.
Yeah, dude.
It's like photographer. If you start at photo, you're screwed.
Yep.
You can't go back. You gotta go back.
Yeah, my tongue dislikes that word. Anyways, he liked anonymity after the death of his brother. He just didn't want anything to do with, like being seen and whatnot. So the first design for their mask was one of those plastic Halloween masks with the string on the back, that goes around the back of your head. So that's what they
Yeah, of
started
course.
with. Yeah, and they took like a razor blade to the eye holes and made them rectangular like Doctor Doom's mask, and then they spray painted the whole thing like a metallic silver. And that mask didn't even last through the first video shoot because a member of the cast sat on it and destroyed it because it was just a cheap little dollar store mask. The second iteration of the mask was intended to be created out of a knight's helmet, but they landed on something else. Blake was walking by one of those stores that sell comics, games, statues, manga. You know those ones that just sell like all the I say nerdy stuff, even though
Yeah.
it's all the
Yeah,
stuff
nerd store.
I'm
Yeah.
into. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
So he walked by one of those, and they had a replica of the mask that Russell Crowe wore in the movie Gladiator. And so he got that mask, brought it to a friend of theirs who was a welder, and they made some adjustments, and that would turn into his like permanent mask. And so the mask was done, but Doom would end up adding like a bunch of additions to it over the years. Like he ended up putting a ruby on the forehead, which was his birthstone, and it kind of identified like the third eye on the mask. He would add some more padding, and at one point it got rusty, so he took it to get chromed at an auto body shop, and just all kinds of things. Like the mask evolved over time, but that ended up being his mask that he would always wear, even just like in public. If he wasn't even performing but going out with like friends, he would like wear the mask in to go see shows and whatnot. So he really just kept his identity like completely hidden. And so while most rappers were working on getting street cred, proving their authenticity, Doom was creating a character that he could write through. And he wanted to be able to tie in like some things from his personal life, but be able to exaggerate it. And he always thought his own life was too boring to write about, so he preferred to rap in an imaginative space. And that kind of reminds me of like what Eminem does a little bit. He just has some crazy rhymes because he, goes all over the place. But I specifically love this quote by Doom talking about the rap scene at the time. And it actually kind of still holds true to nowadays. And this is specifically on the subject of like jewels, cars, fashion, like just kind of everything. And he said, quote, "It don't matter what you look like, your race, your style. If you're cute or fucking ugly, none of that shit matters when it comes down to the music. In jazz, that's what it used to be like. But with hip hop, it's such a new form of music that it got exploited to the point where what you look like and what you're wearing is and how big your chain is matters first. Then people check out the album and see how whack it is. So Doom is just your average Joe, understand? It's all about the skills, so it don't matter what he looked like. He could be you, he could be me." So just kind of like talking about that rappers just like got away from the music itself. It really all they care about is how they look and what they represent and all that kind of thing. So like the art always mattered to Doom more than anything else, which just another part plays into staying anonymous with a mask. He really was not out for fame or any of that. He just wanted to make music, and that was it. Nothing else mattered to him. So more respect for me. Another reason I love MF Doom. So let's talk about that record he'd been putting together that we've been talking about. Operation Doomsday was released October 19th, 1999. Like I said previously, we really won't see any sales numbers or Billboard charting because Doom stuck with independent labels instead of moving into the mainstream. He always recorded on different independent labels. I don't even know if he got offered any mainstream labels, but he just always stuck to the underground. And so two singles or notable songs from the album were Doomsday and Rhymes Like Dimes. Doomsday featured Pebbles the Invisible Girl and uses samples from Kiss of Life by, is this Sade or Sade? How do you, probably Sade?
I would say Sade, but I don't know.
And then Poetry by Boogie Down Productions. And if I remember correctly, a buddy of mine was telling me back when he and I both found out we liked MF Doom, he said that Sade would typically never let people use her music, but she made an exception for Doom because he wasn't trying to use her music to get rich or famous or like any of that. He just wanted it for the art form to make the music. So she gave him the pass to use her song. And I think that might be the only time she ever let anyone use her music. So that's pretty cool. And then also there's the song called Red and Gold that features King Ghidra, which is just another alias of MF Doom. So he actually featured himself on his own song. What a boss. Just under a different name, dude. Because he comes up with so many different characters and he'll feature them on there. And he writes like backstories for each of these characters of who they are, what they are in like a comic book sense. And so he can make a song by MF Doom and then feature another character that's him, but the character is different, if that makes sense. So he does a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's really cool. There's going to be many more monikers that he goes by that we'll talk about. Like, dude has like 6 or 7 different names on different, albums and whatnot. So speaking of those other monikers, he made a slight change to that one and went by King Ghidorah, Geedorah, for the release of his next album. And this is another character from Godzilla, by the way. It's the 3-headed dragon that Godzilla fights. And then this album was Take Me to Your Leader, and that was released on June 17th, 2003. And like I said, Doom went by King Ghidorah with his underground rap group called Monster Island Czars. And I think everybody in that group had a name that was a play on a Godzilla character. So you could tell he just loves that like nerdy kind of side. I feel like if he had been born like closer to when we were growing up, he would have been huge into like Naruto and anime and stuff. I feel like he would have loved all that stuff. And maybe he did like it towards the end of his life, but I know comic books are like that OG. So anyways, on this album, he featured a few guys from his rap group on it. And the only single from the album was Antimatter, which features MF Doom and Mr. Fantastic. And I love that when Doom has features, like he'll give him a moniker that's like part of the universe that he's created. So like this won't be the last time Mr. Fantastic shows up. And then he named the other person, after the Invisible Girl. So it's like it stays in line with like his comic book story when he features people. Same with the Godzilla names when it's one of those. So I just like that, like that staying in line with things. So anyways, later in 2003, Doom released another album under another new moniker, but this one stays in line with the MF Doom character, and he released Vaudeville Villain under the name Victor Von, which is just another play at the character Victor Von Doom, which he based MF Doom off of. And the story behind this album is that Doom and Madlib were working on an album together, and somehow the demos for that album were stolen and leaked on the internet. So they both decided to take a break from the project, work on other projects in the meantime. And this is the album Doom put together during that little break. And so this album was different from normal Doom albums because usually he fully produces his own albums, but this time it was produced by some members of Sound Inc. record label instead of himself. And so on this album, he raps about his new Victor Von character, who's a time-traveling street hustler who, it was like Victor Von Doom, his time machine got broken and he got stuck in New York in the 90s and became a hustler. I just like the backstories of some of the characters.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, believe it or not, this album actually landed at 133 on the Billboard 200. So, our first Billboard mention here. And it actually received raving reviews from critics, and a lot of people think this album was some of his best work. And it had 3 singles that didn't see any major charts. The first was Radon, the second was Saliva, and the third was Mr. Clean. Moving right along. After this, Madlib and Doom's album would finally be completed and dropped on March 23rd, 2004. That'd be called Mad Villainy. And it was almost entirely produced by Madlib, other than the very first track, which was produced by Doom. And the album would peak at number 179 on the Billboard 200 for its initial release, and then it hit 117 on the Billboard 200 when it was re-released in 2014. So, and honestly, a lot of his albums get re-released a couple years later. I just don't mention the re-releases. I don't know why so many get re-released. Probably because he does independent labels, and like slightly bigger labels probably go back and want to release it. but I don't have any solid fact for that. So just my speculation. Anyways, the this album went gold in the U.S. and the U.K., so not bad. The lead single for the album was "Money Folder," which interestingly enough was on the B side of the album. I don't know how often I see the lead single from a B side. Um, so I thought that was interesting. And that song would hit 66 on the Hot R&B hip hop charts. And the second single was All Caps, and this song didn't land on any charts. This album actually would be referred to as Doom's masterpiece, being like his most successful album that he has. This one was about the most like recognition, charts, just like this one really was out there the most. And probably because he worked with Madlib, somebody who's a little more recognizable than he was. So Doom released his second album under the name Victor Vaughn a few months after the release of Mad Villainy, called VV2, which stands for Venomous Villain. And this was released on August 3rd, 2004. And I couldn't find any singles released for the album, but the ratings on the album were 71 out of 100, so it definitely did pretty well from critics' perspective. And this album was entirely produced by MF Doom. It's only like 30 minutes long, so it's a pretty quick listen. Sounds like he just, is always writing music. We'll just group a couple of songs together, toss it on an album, especially since you're producing your own stuff. You just put it out whenever you want. Don't have to worry about the label stressing. So 2004 was actually pretty busy for him because he released another album that year. This would be his third album released in 2004, called Food, which came out November 16th, 2004. And this was under his normal moniker, MF Doom. And the whole album is a concept album that uses a ton of food metaphors and double entendres in the street world that all like reference food in some kind of way. And this album hit 17 on the Billboard Independent Albums, and it also went gold in the US. And the album had two singles. First one was One Beer, and One Beer was produced by Madlib. And the song didn't chart, but it did go gold. And the second single was Hoe Cakes, which didn't chart. And after those two singles were released, a third song kind of blew up like out of nowhere. Rap Snitch Niches, I believe you say that. K, I think the K is silent. There's a K in front of it. Which features Mr. Fantastic again. And it didn't chart, but the song went platinum. So I guess people really like that one. Sorry, getting myself together. The nose is killing me. In 2005, moving along, Doom took his biggest leap into mainstream, making an album with DJ Danger Mouse. They put together the album The Mouse and the Mask, and that was released on October 10th, 2005. I really like the album artwork for this one. It's like Doom's mask with like mouse ears on it and stuff. It's like a combination of both their logos mixed into one. It looks really cool. So the album was created by sampling music from various Adult Swim shows, specifically Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It has a bunch of the characters with skits throughout the album, and it uses like different music from different shows that appeared on Adult Swim. Once again, playing into that, he just loves the comic book and like cartoons and stuff like that. Just like, I remember, I think he uses some clips from his Operation Doomsday. I think he sampled some of the old Scooby-Doo shows on there as well. So loves his cartoons. So anyways, the album actually peaked at number 41 on the Billboard 200, and it had two singles, Sofa King and Old School. Neither managed to land on any charts. The album only sold approximately like 170,000 copies or something by 2008 or so. So over the course of however many years. And 2005 is also when Doom made his legendary feature on the Gorillaz song November Comes that we mentioned on our previous episode from the Gorillaz. So love that. That's also that's really the first song I heard MF Doom on and led me into his whole discography. So that song means a lot to me, for finding new artists. And that connection would actually stay. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So Doom did a little producer work for Ghostface Killah's album Fish Scale and More Fish in 2006. And Doom wouldn't actually release another album himself until March 24th, 2009. Born Like This would actually be Doom's final solo album. and this time it was released under the moniker of just Doom, so no MF before. And the album debuted at number 52 on the Billboard 200. And the only single from the album was Gazillion Ear. It didn't hit any charts, but the song ended up being one of those ones that had like a little album where it has like 6 remixes by a bunch of different people. You see that a lot with different like oh gosh, what is it called? Dead Mouse and stuff has a bunch of songs like that where he'll just like pick a song, remix it 5 different ways, and just put an album, like a mini EP of that song. So that song ended up being like that. And the album involved producers Madlib and Jay Dilla. So him and Madlib, worked together a lot through the rest of his years. So moving along, Doom performed his first live show in London on March 5th, 2010. And he released a live album a few months later on September 14th, 2010. From the performance. And then when Doom attempted to re-enter the U.S. after performing in London, he was refused entry because he never got his U.S. citizenship, which we mentioned at the very beginning. So he was unable to come home. So he just ended up setting up shop and living in the UK for the rest of his life. And the rest of Doom's work would all be collaboration albums with other artists since he'd made his final solo album. And the first of those was Key to the Cuffs, which was a collaboration between Janiro Jarrell and MF Doom, who went by JJ Doom on that album to match the other artist. And the album was released on August 20th, 2012, and peaked at number 148 on the Billboard 200. No singles to talk about, but I thought it was cool that the song Bite the Thong features Damon Albarn from Gorillaz, so that connection stayed true, worked with each other again. So Doom's next collaboration was with rapper Bishop Nehru, and they released the album Nehruvian Doom on October 7th, 2014. This album debuted at number 59 on the Billboard 200. And this album was Nehru's debut and didn't produce any singles, and a lot of people thought that it was just a pretty lackluster album, that Nehru was still in his teens when he made this, so they kind of thought he was just a little young to be hitting the scene, but who knows. Then Doom's next collaboration came in March of 2018 with Czarface, and they released Czarface meets Metalface on March 30th, 2018. This album would be the last album released before Doom's death in 2020. This album hit 134 on the Billboard 200, and the album had 2 singles. The first was Nautical Depth, and the second was Bomb Throne. Unfortunately, neither one hit any charts. And then, like I said, MF Doom would actually pass away on October 31st, 2020, so on Halloween, due to respiratory issues. He died from angioedema, which is swelling under the skin. And I think it was like swelling of the lungs and like under the skin, everything. And it was actually a result of an adverse reaction to some blood pressure medicine that he was prescribed. And I think he died I think he had like kidney disease and something with his lungs at the time. And the sad part is his wife and his kids weren't able to visit him in the hospital until after he died because it was right in the heat of COVID. So they didn't, there was all that, like, they wouldn't let you into a hospital very much. There was a lot of weird stuff with COVID as far as being able to traverse through them. So, and it isn't documented when he and his wife got married, but it was like sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s. There's like no exact date to reference. Like I said, he kept his life way under wraps, so no one would know. And him and his wife had 5 kids. Only 4 are alive. He had one that passed away at the age of 14 in 2017. The health reasons weren't listed. And Doom had one more posthumous album. It was another collaboration with Czarface that came out. They did a second collaboration. They called it Super What, and that was released May 7th, 2021. The album didn't hit any charts or have any singles, and probably because every album struggled during the COVID era, honestly. And the album's 2-sided. One side is all Czarface, and the other is all Doom. So, and that wraps up our story today.
Wow,
bringing us up to nowadays. So,
I like it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, that brings us to our ratings. So, as you guys know, we rate every artist out of 6 categories. Those categories are creativity, evolution, replayability, cultural impact, emotional connection, and nostalgia factor. We rate each of those out of 5, and then we average them out to get a total rating out of 5. Ashton, why don't you start us off with creativity?
I'm like right here at like a 4 or 5. Oh, it's hard. I'm gonna go. I'll give him a 5. I think one of the things he is known for is just being a very creative artist within his space, like with like his characters, with his look. He just does everything the opposite of how every rapper does things, and like remaining independent, always staying small, like hiding his identity, like not being into the fame, the money, the cars, chains, all that. Just really like taking that dive into like creating characters and things like that. I just think like his creativity is above and beyond. He was also known for just being like a true wordsmith. Like if you listen to his rhyme schemes, they are just absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
So,
I was going to give him a 5 out of 5 as well before you said that. And for all similar reasons, it seems like it's an easy 5 out of 5 there. Evolution is another one I was playing with a 5 out of 5, maybe a 4. He was just always trying new things, always go in different directions, new identities, new name, and everything was released under a different name almost. Like that's evolution to me. So I'm going to give him a 5 out of 5 there because I know some of these other ones are going to be rated a little lower for me.
yep, I'm with you on the evolution for 5 out of 5. For
Replayability.
replayability, I'm
This
at
was
like a
sitting about half for me.
yep, same for me. Even though I love him, I'm at a 3 out of 5 just because he has a lot of songs that are kind of goofy, quirky. And I do, go back and listen to his stuff. He's got some that I just love to death. But then there's others that are just like skits and whatnot. So like they're not exactly like meant for listening to over and over. But for the ones that do play over and over, I really enjoy.
Now, cultural impact here. This one's somewhat subjective. I think I'm leaning towards maybe a 2 or so.
Yeah, my question with this one is cultural impact how much he impacted like the audience or other artists because he's like one of those like heavy inspirations for, like I said, your rapper's favorite rapper. He's like, if within the hip hop space and other rappers, like he's legendary, and for the people that do know him, he's also legendary, but because he stayed independent, he stayed relatively small his whole career. So that's where I'm like,
Yeah, I was interpreting
that's
cultural impact more as like, um, almost like general fame, like just the massiveness of the artist. How did they impact the culture as a whole? But yeah, you
gotcha.
bring up a good point. In his case, it's kind of special because he impacted culture indirectly.
I'll hit him with a 3. Well, that seems fair.
Yeah, 3 seems like a good compromise there. The
Yeah.
last 2 are easy for me. Emotional connection and nostalgia factor are both going to come in at a 1. That's nothing against him. He's just a relatively new artist for me in terms of nostalgia factor, and I don't connect with any rap lyrics in general for the most part. It's very rare that I do. So that's a 1 for me there on emotional connection.
So for me, emotional connection will be a 2 out of 5, a little higher. Same. I don't really connect to a whole lot. However, his lyrics are real goofy and bring up Marvel characters and whatnot. So like I kind of associate with that. It's pretty cool. Nostalgia is going to be a 4 out of 5. Just love listening to it. It just takes me back to when I really first was getting into rap and hip hop and stuff. So like the nostalgia factor is actually a much higher one for me.
Yeah, that brings you to a 3.7 rounded. It was 3.6 repeating out of 5, and me at an even 3 out of 5. I figured it'd be probably about middle of the pack for me here.
Nice.
Coming into it kind of fresh.
Well, everybody.
Yeah, so there you go. 3.7 for Ashton, 3 for me. That'll do it on our MF Doom episode. What's your rating?
Yeah,
Let us know what you think about MF Doom in the comments or on our website. You can find contact forms and stuff for us there or on our socials. We're on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube. And if you're on some other podcast platform, please take a second to hit us with a 5-star review. That helps us keep this podcast going. We also have a Patreon, like I mentioned at the top of the show. $5 a month, going to get you a lot of cool rewards, including access to our Discord. So Until next time, we will see you guys next week.